Almost everything I do in my workshop I enjoy doing, except cutting glass. It doesn't always go well, although this time it went pretty good. In order to get the 10 pieces I needed, I had to cut 11. What's that, 90% success rate? I guess I can't complain. Before I start varnishing with the Varathane here, I want to go over all the flat surfaces one last time with fine grit sandpaper. And here I go on the first coat of the first of the 80 pieces. Why did I say I was going to make 10 of these things? And as you can see, I have another shirt, other than all of those blue ones with the Greyhound logo on them. Now I know I mentioned this in one of my other videos, and that is that there's nothing more boring than watching paint dry, unless it's watching the person put the paint on. So I'll try not to bore you here. But what I did was I put 4 coats of clear coat on all of these pieces. It took me the better part of 2 days. Here all the pieces have received their first coat. Now I know that these tops look a little bit more shiny than the rest. Well, that's because I had just finished doing those. All 80 pieces now have had 4 coats of high gloss Varathane. And the 5th coat is going to be semi-gloss. Now I've never done this before, so it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. After one last light sanding, I put on the coat of semi-gloss. You can't help but notice that 2 or 3 of the sides here look a little bit blotchy. Well, it had to happen on the very last coat. Remember when they were all stacked up like dominoes? Well, I guess you know what happened. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to wait until they're all dry and give those 2 or 3 pieces just another coat of the semi-gloss. But the rest all look really good. I'm very happy with the way this turned out. You remember on the cedar template I had drilled a hole in the back at the top of the clock to hang it on the wall? Well, on these mahogany clocks I've decided to do it a little bit differently. I thought that being as I had to put a hole in the back anyway so you could stick your pinky in it in order to, lift it up and pull it off, why not use that same hole to hang the clock on? So here, instead of having the hole in the center of the back, I'm going to have it up near the top. Because stacking those 10 backs all together and drilling them all at the same time works so well, I'm going to do the same thing on the dial boards for the hand shaft holes. I'm doing a lot of checking and double checking here to make sure that I've got these holes in the exact center of the boards. I deliberately drilled the hole here about 1/16 of an inch larger than the hand shaft. And the reason for that is so that in the event that the dial board doesn't mount exactly centered in the case, I'll still have a little bit of room to adjust things here. I'm painting all the visible plywood white. This will make it look a little better. I matched up the sides here as best I could, but you can only see one side at a time anyway, unless you use a mirror. As for the tops and the bottoms, they're all pretty much the same, so it doesn't really matter which one I use with which pair of sides. It's time now to cut these spindles to the right length. Try and get them exactly the same length as the sides, maybe just a hair shorter. And just in case anybody's wondering, a hair is just a little less than a smidgen. Using one of the sides as a reference here, this is where I get the measurement of the exact length less a hair. All 40 spindles are now cut to the right length, and now I just got to get them fastened to the sides. And at this point, I'm not sure how I'm going to do that yet. I've decided that I'm going to use a combination of glue and my headless pinner. And here I'm just rigging up a jig. I'm stapling it down onto my workbench, and it'll help hold the spindle nice and straight onto the side. I was going to mix up some 5-minute epoxy, and then I thought, well, no, I'll just use Varathane as glue. It actually works pretty good for something like this. I'm actually quite happy with the way this went. Those little pins, they could hardly be seen where they penetrated the mahogany. Painting those dowel boards white did make them look better, but then it also made the dowel board a little thicker, and it didn't want to slide into the slot that I'd routed out in the top and the bottom. So I had to just sand off just the edges here a little. The big moment has arrived. It's time to try and put all these parts together and see if we can end up with one economical mahogany mantel clock. Now, if you'll recall, the original idea of this project was to see how inexpensively I could make a clock. Well, things sort of got carried away, and instead of using a 6-inch dial, I used an 8-inch dial. I used a mahogany instead of a lesser expensive lumber. I put glass in the front. I could have saved $1 or so by not doing that. But you know, altogether, this whole thing only cost around $22. You know, that's not really too bad. The movement at the time of making this video sells for $4.95 from Craft Time Clockery. That's pretty inexpensive too. These hands come free with the movement. All you have to do is specify what style you want and what size you want when you're ordering your dial and movement. Really nice. The batteries that are included with these movements that I get from Craft Time Clockery, they're always right up. I like to do the final tightening by hand. And we're just about done here with this clock. Remember those cheap little felt pads that I got from Home Depot? Well, they're going to cover up the screws and act as feet. Okay, there's one. Now let's see if we can get 9 more to adorn my table saw. Now I'll be the first to admit it. I know that none of these clocks is ever going to make it into Buckingham Palace as one of Her Majesty's 1,000 clocks. However, there's a real good reason for that. I only made 10 of these, and somebody has to do without.